So I'm the minister on the panel. I'm the clergyman. Sean already quoted Jesus, so you won't hear any more of that from me. I'm a Unitarian.
A Unitarian.
But I will quote Confucius. Confucius is said to have said, "Wisdom is knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know." And I want to start with that because there's just a whole lot about this drone thing that I don't know. And I would fathom to say that we don't know either. And that's just part of the problem, the lack of what we know, lack of transparency. I am not a client of Chaplain, but do you have a card? Because I may need that when I leave here. And I felt, both from Sean and Christopher, some of the burden that you carry, that I carry with you as people who have been part of this system. And I just, if you could just both stand up for a minute, both of you, but the number 359 I heard, the number that you put out at the end and the weight of carrying that alone, that's a lot to carry alone. And I heard what you said about diffusion of responsibility, and what I just want to invite our audience to do with me this evening is, if you feel that you share some of the responsibility with these men for the deaths that they have caused, then I invite you to stand with them, as I stand with them, that we share responsibility with you for the deaths. Our hands are dirty, and we're in this together. All right. Thank you. So I am an ordained clergyman by profession. I serve as the called and settled minister of the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Rock Tavern in New York, in the Hudson Valley, about 15 miles north of West Point, the U.S. Military Academy. We are a peace advocate congregation, and we struggle. We haven't reconciled, we struggle with what that means. As a peace advocate congregation, one of 10 in the country in our denomination. And part of what that means for us is to hold the tension. We are committed as a congregation to support military personnel. We have cadets in the academy who are members of our congregation. But also part of what it means for us to work for peace is to advocate and to be activists, to resist. For the past 5 years, I have held ecclesiastical endorsement from the Unitarian Universalist Association to serve as a U.S. Army chaplain. I'm the son of a Vietnam veteran. I'm married 18 years. My wife is a Japanese citizen. And I honor Mitsuko this evening because she has taught me to be sensitive to those people who at times we've called our enemy. We have 5 children. I'm a parent. I'm a father. And from September 2012 until February of 2013, I took a leave of absence from my congregation. I left my children. I left my family and served as a chaplain for a signal battalion supporting the 3rd Infantry Division in southern Afghanistan. The role of the chaplain is to nurture the living, care for the wounded, and honor the dead. That is the motto of the Chaplain's Corps. And as an active duty chaplain in Afghanistan, I counseled hundreds of service members. Many of them had what we're calling this evening moral injury. If this term is new for you, it's been written about in the literature, coined by VA psychiatrists and psychologists, defined as a betrayal of what's right, especially by those in legitimate authority. Defined further as perpetrating, failing to prevent, bearing witness to acts that transgress deeply held values or beliefs. This is a moral injury. It's been published, it's written about, I've published, I've written about it. It's real. I conducted dozens of religious services and oversaw volunteer programs for Afghan children and blood donations. I personally gave 23 units of my own platelets through the Armed Services Blood Program. Platelets are helpful in stopping traumatic bleeding. I also supported 14 dignified transfer ceremonies at Kandahar Airfield. For those of you who don't know, a dignified transfer ceremony goes something like this. As the American war dead leave the combat zone to the United States, they're carried in a flag-draped casket by soldiers across the tarmac, up the ramp of a C-17 transport plane. The soldiers render a solemn salute. The chaplain reads the name, the age, the hometown of the fallen, and shares a few words about their surviving family members. The chaplain reads a scripture and then prays. Finally, taps is played on a bugle. And the ceremony says, this life mattered. My presence at these ceremonies granted me special access to the restricted flight line, and that's where I saw my first drone. I witnessed drones, some armed with Hellfire missiles, some surveillance, take off and land in their mystery-shrouded assignments. I was troubled with questions. Who did we kill? What was their name? Where did they live? Who had loved them? And the contrast between the respectful solemnity of the ceremony I helped enact for the American war dead and the anonymity of the imagined victims of drone strikes, it was stark. It was that cognitive dissonance is the word that I hear both of you talking about. The disconnect between what we're thinking and hearing and what we're experiencing. So I wondered, what is this drone mission anyway? Who piloted them, from where? Who made the targeting decisions? Who accounted for the mishaps, the deadly so-called collateral damage? These questions haunted me then and continue to haunt me now. Well, at the base, drones were not a safe topic for inquiry. My unit had no operational connection to drone strikes. I inquired with several senior Air Force chaplains who suggested quite emphatically that it was not my business as an Army officer. I think it was that compartmentalization that we were hearing about earlier. I thought, however, that as a minister to soldiers, as a citizen of these United States, and a person of conscience, that perhaps it was my business. For about a month, I reviewed all of the publicly available information on drone strikes. I read Living Under Drones, Death, Injury, and Trauma to Civilians from U.S. Drone Practices. You can find it online. The report was co-published by Stanford and NYU. It came out the month that I arrived in Afghanistan and was available on the internet, made for sobering reading. Well, I concluded our drone strikes were harming innocent people in a manner that seemed to me both disproportionate and unnecessary. Now, this is a tentative conclusion. As I said earlier, there's much that I didn't know and I still don't know. But nevertheless, to remain silent for me and my tradition would have felt like betrayal. So I decided to openly and publicly question the morality of this kind of warfare in my role as a military chaplain charged with moral leadership to the Army. On Veterans Day in 2012, I delivered a sermon called A Veterans Day Confession for America. I confessed to broken promises with Afghan interpreters. I confessed to extrajudicial assassinations and death by remote control. I confessed to war made easy without due process. And I confessed to a national closet bursting with skeletons of innocent dead, killed by our government in the name of America. I preach this sermon because I believe that public confession is just the religious word for revealing dark secrets. We call it confession. Well, I believe that public confession is the best way, one of the best ways to examine our collective conscience, to purify our intentions, to relieve the soul distress, the moral injury that we're hearing about carried by so many of our service members and veterans, and recalibrate America's moral compass. I further believe that speaking truth to power is my prerogative as a professional religious leader and my duty under Army regulations that at the time required chaplains to challenge moral turpitude in conflict with Army values. I say at the time because the revision of those regulations happened last year and that line was taken out. There used to be a line that charged chaplains with speaking with a prophetic voice. I loved that. I memorized it. It guided me. But that is now gone, completely omitted. It concerns me. In my sermon, I didn't hide my identity as a military chaplain. I delivered the sermon to a gathering of service members and contractors who had freely gathered one Sunday morning at Kandahar Airfield for a worship service in my tradition. It was a Unitarian Universalist service at Kandahar Airfield. I then released the text of the sermon to my denomination, and speaking only for myself, it appeared on a Unitarian Universalist church website. Well, 2 days later, after the online posting, an Army lawyer sent me a very nasty email and alerted the battalion commander to my sermon. He summoned me to his office. The conversation went something like this. "Chaplain, did you write this?" "Yes, sir." "Do you believe this?" "Well, sir, it's not really a statement of belief. It's a confession. It's meant to purify intentions and recalibrate our moral compass." That didn't go well with him. He said, "Your message," he said, "your message doesn't support the mission. And you make us look like the bad guys." Well, duh. I mean, I didn't say that. But so I said, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" He said, "Well, you you need to take it off the website. I wasn't going to argue with the colonel, so I said, Roger that, and I did. Nevertheless, the commander said he had lost confidence in me and initiated an investigation. Article 15.6. In January of 2013, I was handed a General Officer Memorandum of Reprimand. The general reprimanded me for, quote unquote, politically inflammatory speech. Now, I still think that the Hellfire missiles fired from drones are more inflammatory than anything I ever said in my sermon. But anyway, the commander used that reprimand to release me from active duty. I was sent home from Afghanistan. And I was sent home with a referred evaluation, a do not promote evaluation that led to my discharge from active duty. In carrying out this course of action, the Army disregarded a defense my trial defense lawyer in Afghanistan made for me, a defense that was reinforced by statements from nearly 36 soldiers, including officers and other chaplains. Everybody in my congregation who had been there for the sermon wrote a letter on my behalf. Those statements included a statement from a prominent theologian in my denomination, as well as veterans and concerned citizens from across the United States who had read my post online. My lawyer said he had received a level of support unprecedented in his 17 years as an Army lawyer. The Army also disregarded without comment my fundamental defense that I had a constitutional right to religious freedom. For the contents of my sermon, with even military authorities cannot censor. A campaign of blacklisting has since ensued, and several assignments were denied to me. I eventually authorized a congressional inquiry, and through that, I gained a long overdue promotion and a new assignment in the Army Reserve. Ironically, before I was sent home from Afghanistan, I was handed an envelope with medals, including the war on terror, Global War on Terror medal. When I joined the Army, I didn't swear an oath to defend secret and unaccountable killing. I took an oath to defend the Constitution, a set of laws that I believe drone warfare significantly undermines. I joined the Department of Defense. Defense, not a department of preemptive, aggressive, and endless war. My faith affirms the inherent worth and dignity of all people everywhere. And I believe Americans who share this affirmation have a responsibility to advocate for a U.S. foreign policy consistent with our collective regard for human dignity. Military leadership also has a responsibility to advocate for a method of warfighting consistent with our military values, like respect, integrity, and personal courage. Halting these lethal drone strikes following the recommendations of the Stimson Center, we're going to hear more about those in a minute, I think is a vital step to healing what we're calling moral injury, reclaiming national honor, and restoring the soul of America.